we left off, Act 1, Scene 2, where Hamlet replies to his mother rather pointedly with the seems, madam speech. Okay? So, just summarize. What is he telling us? What is he telling the audience in those lines, line 76 through 82 through 86?
He's like, you moved on a bit too fast, I think.
Moved on a bit too fast, but he's talking more about himself. He's saying, yes, I am wearing black. Yes, I do have tears. Yes, I do walk around sighing all the time. Yes, I do have a frowny face. Yes, I do look at the ground a lot. But he says, all of these are what?
Like normal things in the morning.
Or these are signs of mourning. These are shows of mourning. He says these are things a man may play, may pretend to do. And he says, but I have that within which passes show. That is, it cannot be pretended. It cannot be play acted. These clothing, tears, sighs are but the trappings and the suits of woe. What has he just told us? How is Hamlet internally? Depressed.
Down bad.
That's putting it mildly. He's a wreck. He is a wreck. He's barely keeping it together. Okay? How do I know? These things, what he has within, goes beyond showing. It can't be portrayed. Because what if it were? What is Hamlet suggesting? Not stating. What is Hamlet implying? If I were to really show you what I have going inside, there'd be dead bodies everywhere. And I don't mean he'd be willy-nilly killing people. What I mean is Hamlet is saying he is so overwrought that it won't take much to light that fuse. The king hears Hamlet and yet doesn't hear Hamlet. 'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these morning duties to your father. Morning duties. Hamlet, way to go. Good job. Why? It is within your nature to do what? To give these morning duties. What is a duty? It's something you have to do. It's a responsibility. Is it something you want to do? Not necessarily. He's saying, Hamlet, you are doing what? You are acting the part of your nature. What is his nature? What does the king mean by that word? What does Shakespeare mean by that word? His nature, his being is what? Son of Hamlet Sr. He got his nature from his father. That's why it is in your nature to do this. He's saying this is what a son should do by his nature as son to father. Okay? But, what does but always mean? I'm going to undercut what I just said. You must know. Your father lost a father. Come on, Hamlet, you have to know this. Your grandfather's dead. That father lost, that is your grandfather, lost his father, your great-grandfather. And the survivor, who's the survivor of all those dead fathers? Hamlet. The survivor bound in filial obligation, filial, childlike, offspring of, okay, obligation, a duty you owe to your parents. What? For some term to do obsequious honors. For some term. What is the appropriate time for mourning? Do we have one? Can I say to any one of you, say Sky's mom dies or something. I'm assuming her mom is still alive and that they're close. You have a week. That's kind of crazy, right? How long has Hamlet's father been dead? Do we have an exact time? No, we don't. We're going to hear anywhere from a month to twice 2 months. A month to 4 months. Is a month a long enough time to grieve for a parent?
No.
My dad died in 2020. Some of my siblings still wrestling with that. My mom died 5 years before that. Some of my siblings are still, Mother's Day, I miss my, and I'm like, she's been dead for 10 years, guys, deal with it. It's because I'm a cold-hearted, rotten bastard. Anyways, it's right to do it for a set amount of time. The obsequious sorrow, obsequies were a writing form, a genre of writing in Shakespeare's day. Those are poems, commendatory poems on someone's death, where you're expressing sorrow. So he's saying sorrowful sorrow. But to persever, we would say persevere, in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. Condolement, condolences. Obstinate condolences? Do any of you want to have someone come up to you and go, you're wonderfully obstinate? Because what does that mean? You're immovable, you're implacable. You're like a donkey. Donkey plants its hooves, it's not going to move. Obstinate condolement, you're stuck in the condoling period. 'Tis a course, a practice, a behavior, a journey of impious stubbornness. What's impious? What's the I am mean in front of the piousness?
Like, always.
It's that prefix, by the way, that changes the pronunciation from pious to pious. It means not. Not pious. Okay. Sorrow, the proper sorrow one shows upon the death of a friend, loved one, family member, should be pious. It should be holy sorrow. It should be righteous sorrow, so to speak. Impious means you're taking it a bit too far. And then you add the word stubbornness to it. And that means, like the donkey image, you've planted your feet. You're not willing to move on. One charge against him. 'Tis unmanly grief. So if it's unmanly, what is it? Think
Child
sex.
marriage.
No. Possibly. I think it's sex. If you're not a man, there's no transgender stuff this time period.
What?
You're not a man,
Woman.
you're a woman. 'Tis womanly grief. Okay. Within the time period the play is supposed to be said, what kind of word is that? What kind of words are those to a young-ish, whatever, man? There's a phrase, them's fighting words. You just called me a woman. You just emasculated me with your words. Literally unmanly. He has unmanned him. Chop. It shows that is your kind of grief, shows a will most incorrect to heaven. Should Claudius really be talking about wills that are incorrect to heaven? A heart and fortified. Back up. A will most incorrect. How is it incorrect to heaven? There is godly grief, St. Paul talks about. That is grief that is for godly reasons. Loss of a loved one is a godly grief. When does it become ungodly? Here's an example. I'll give you a real historical example. Queen Victoria. When her husband, Prince Albert, Queen Consort, died, relatively early within her reign. She became queen in 1844, I think it was. He died in the 1850s. She wore black the rest of her life. Why? She was in mourning the rest of her life. Okay? That would probably be considered ungodly grief. Okay? A will most incorrect heaven. A heart unfortified. Man up, that's what that means. A weak heart. A mind impatient. Impatient. What does patient mean? Enduring, overcoming, suffering. You know, the word for pathos, which means to feel, is related to the word for, in Latin, passio, passion, which means to suffer. Okay? So a mind impatient means a mind unwilling to suffer. To take what Hamlet is going to call later in his famous non-soliloquy, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And understanding simple and unschooled. Simple, I'm going to use a derogatory term. I'm going to use a term that woke people don't use anymore anywhere. Are you retarded, Hamlet? That's what a mind simple means, or an understanding simple. You're not very bright, are you? And unschooled, untaught. Well, depending on how old Hamlet is, he's at least in his teens. Okay? He should have been schooled by what? Other than obvious literary school. I mean, he's a university student. Experience. Life. How do we know? Your father lost his father lost his father. Surely you've known someone who's died by now, Hamlet, is the implication. For what we know must be, and is as common as any of the most vulgar thing to sense, why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? What is it that we must know, that we know must be? What happens to all of us? We die. So why are you taking it in peevish opposition? What's meant by peevish? Who acts peevishly? Little children. Take my ball and go away. Or, that's peevish opposition. Fie. We could almost, let's update Shakespeare. F it. That's what fie there means, kind of. 'Tis a fault to heaven. A fault, it's an affront, it's a sin to heaven. A fault against the dead, it's a sin against the dead. Why? Someone dies, you read a piece of literature, you watch a TV show or whatever, and they have a tombstone and they put R.I.P. Doesn't mean Rip died there. What's it stand for?
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Actually, requiescat in pacem. It's Latin for rest in peace. He's not letting his father rest in peace, is he? That's why it's an affront to the dead. A fault to nature? How is it a fault to nature? How is it a sin against nature? Go out and look in nature sometime. Drive on any road in Murfreesboro or Tennessee or anywhere in the South. What are you going to see? Armadillo, skunk, possum, deer. Everything dies. It goes against nature to kind of say, but it shouldn't be that way. I've got a colleague, I shouldn't say this, office door, I don't care what your politics are. No on fracking, no on oil, no on nuclear. It's like, really? How are you going to fly a plane? Solar? Ain't going to work. You got to have something that kind of works. It's against nature to suggest otherwise. So he goes on. Fault of nature, to reason most absurd. It doesn't make sense to have this attitude you're showing, Hamlet. Why? Because reason says the clock starts ticking the moment you go, wah, when you're born. Whose common theme, the common theme of reason, of rationality is, and to all those other things, death of fathers. This play was written, I wrote it on the board the other day, 1599 to 1601. We know it gets entered in the Stationer's Register in 1602, so it had to be written before then, and it isn't entered in Francis Mears, a guy who kept a diary and such. It's not in Francis Mears's, can't remember the title of this publication, that in 1598 lists several of the works that Shakespeare done. Palladius, Timnia, something like that. And it's not in the Stationer, it's in the Stationer's Register in 1602, so it's written between those time periods, all right? Whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still hath cried from the first corpse, which is not an accident, the first corpse, first death, Abel, killed by his younger brother. To he that died today, not Hamlet Sr., just anybody who dies today, this must be so. Oh, here's where I was getting to this. I lost it and came back. Shakespeare's father died during that time period. Okay? Had to bury him. Which means he had to leave London. For a few days at least. To go from London to Stratford today, it's about a 90-minute train ride. Shakespeare's day, it would be a couple of days on horseback. We pray you, throw to earth this unprevailing woe, meaning bury it. Bury it with your dead dad. And think of us, royal we, think of us, me, as of a father. For let the world take note. So now he's addressing everybody who's around, the council, the advisors and such. Let the world take note, you are the most immediate to our throne. And with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. The most immediate to our throne means what? You're next in line, Hamlet. Hamlet should be going, yay, right? What's Hamlet probably thinking? I was next in line before. Dirty rottenness. For your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire. Retrograde, I hate that word. It's a term from astrology. It's when something is in decline. We don't want you to go back to Wittenberg. We want you to stay here. And we beseech you, bend you, it's another term, bend you, move your influence to what? Remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye. Cheer, his face, and comfort of our eye, and you will be what? Our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. He didn't hear the little more than kin and less than kind, because you probably wouldn't have said the cousin and son thing again, all right? But what else? You'll be the head courtier. Not, you'll be my right-hand man. Why? He already has one of those. His name is Polonius. He will not become Claudius's chief advisor. So, the queen says, let not thy mother lose her prayers, Hamlet. I pray thee, stay with us. Go not to Wittenberg. I shall in all my best obey you, madam. He doesn't answer the king. Whatever you want, Mom. King, no response. Why, 'tis a loving and fair reply. Be as ourself in Denmark. That is, you will be treated as, you will be respected as, you will be equal to me in Denmark. He just won't have the job of king. He'll get all the perks. All right? So, everybody leaves but Hamlet. We get the first of a bunch of soliloquies in this play. I think it might have the most soliloquies. I'm not positive. Pretty sure it does. And Hamlet says, oh, that this what's the next word? Sulled. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. This is from, I believe, a quarto reading. The first folio edition says, oh, that this, let me double check, see if there's a footnote for that. Or do I have it just the other way around? Yep, folio has solid. First folio edition has solid. Okay, let's look at the rest of those first two lines, and then go back to this. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. What chemical process is he talking about? Chemical process.
Melting?
Close.
Dissolving?
Yes. Evaporating. Okay? Let's say you have ice. You put it in a pot. The pot has a lid. From that lid comes tubing. The tubing is curled, comes back around. The tubing empties out into a glass or something. You put ice in that pot. You heat it up. It melts. It evaporates. Turns into a gas. Cools in the tube and comes out in what state? Let me rephrase that. Let's say the water that the ice is made of is this water, which came out of my refrigerator. It went through a filter, but it's not pure. Okay? What is the moisture that comes out of that tubing? It's pure. Why? It's distilled. What's been left behind? Any impurities in it. Oh, that this too, let's use water, that this too sullied water, ice, would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Makes sense, right? But solid makes sense if it's ice. If it's not ice, then sullied helps make sense. What's the point? There's two very different meanings about these. What is something that is sullied? What happens if your reputation gets sullied? It's ruined. Okay, it's interesting that you went to the nth degree, because ruin means there's no reclaiming it. There's no melting, thawing, and resolving itself. There's no making it pure again. Okay? So go back to the original. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, decompose, thaw, become liquid, as it were, and resolve itself into a dew. What's the real process Hamlet is talking about? With this one, it's purification. What's he really talking about? Dying and being born again, to use a Protestant term. Death and resurrection. Why? Because in the Christian tradition, what is that? That's this. During the process of life, traditional Christian, let me take that back. Let's use Calvinist, Protestant Christianity. You become a Christian, you get baptized and all that kind of stuff. And how do you live your life? Like Hugh Hefner? Naked women all around you till the day you die? No, because what's not going to happen? you're not going to become sanctified. Sanctified. Made sanctus. Made holy. It's only by being made holy that this, the sullied flesh, to use Pauline terms, the old Adam gets turned into the new Adam. The beginning of that process is baptism. Why? Because in baptism, whether it's sprinkled or dunked, you go down into that water, or that water is sprinkled on you, and that signifies what? Dying with Christ and then rising up. Born again, rising with Christ. You put on Christ. You put on the new Adam. You become, Paul says, a new creation. You become as Adam was supposed to be in Christ, right? That's this. So how did this get in the first folio? All this is deep theological, stuff. This is not. This is an error. More than likely, this is an error. This is caused by a copyist, someone getting ready to set type for a printed book, sees probably this word, something like this. Okay, there's no, what do I phrase I'm looking for? No standard of spelling in Shakespeare's day. None. You spell the way you think things should be spelled. You see this, notice it's the O, well, it's thought to be an O, isn't closed. So it looks like a U. This, well, that doesn't look like a word. But you do that, sullied. We say, no, solid. Shakespeare's day, this can be pronounced like this. And I used to work on Renaissance manuscripts, looked at literally hundreds, if not thousands of them, when I was working on the John Donne Variorum and on my dissertation. Spellings of all different kinds, like 6 or 7 different ways to spell the word flower, or shower, or soul, B-E-E, B-E. In the first folio, you have the word be spelled both ways, meaning the verb to be, not be. If that word comes at the end of a line, it's almost always spelled with 2 E's. You know why? So that the end of the line comes out to the margin. So that where there's a margin on the edge, not a literal line, but where the implied line is, all the letters of the last words end up right next to it. You also have words that get spaced out, just like in modern proportional spacing and such. It's not, this is just a misreading probably for the word sullied. And there's a principle in scholarly, in what's called textual editing, called or I can't remember that one. This is the most difficult reading. Okay? In textual editing, there's a principle called the lectio difficilior, which means if you have 2 variant readings of a text, the reading that is the most difficult to understand, that's probably the one the author intended. Why? Because copyists aren't authors. They're not necessarily the brightest bulbs in the box. They're just copying what they see in front of them. And if they see something they don't understand, what do? You make it into something you do understand. And if somebody sees this word, even if they see this word and they don't know what to sully means, they will assume that's wrong and make it to something they do think. Oh, solid. Something solid can melt, can thaw, must mean solid.
I mean, obviously now we would just try and look for more evidence of sullied being used in this way and other.
Yeah, we would.
At the time.
And similarly, if you have a whole bunch of manuscripts, we don't for Shakespeare. We have we have no manuscripts of any of Shakespeare's plays. We have earlier and later printed versions, and then we have the first folio, okay? Here's an example. When I was working on my dissertation, which was the Holy Sonnets of John Donne, there's a bunch of manuscripts, and there are several different what are called manuscript groups. That is, some of the manuscripts all have similar variant readings like this sullied. Others would have something like solid. That is a way to group certain things together. But if you've only got one thing in front of you, and it looks like a word that you don't think is a word, you try to think of a word that it looks like it could mean. And if you've never seen or heard or read the word sullied, well, you do know what solid is, and so you put in solid, right? Which is why this edition and most other editions use sullied. It's the more difficult reading, and it implies what? That solid does not. Impure. Oh, that this two, why two twos? It's emphatic. What is Hamlet saying about this, meaning his flesh? It's really dirty. Does flesh just mean this? No. It means the body. It means the fleshly existence. Paul distinguishes, John, the gospel writer, distinguished between flesh and body. In one, flesh is good, and the other one is not. John, when he talks about flesh, flesh is good. In the beginning was the word, and it was made flesh, he says. For Paul, flesh is always the sinful flesh. Okay? All that for 2 lines. Or, so remember, this is Hamlet speaking to whom? Out there to the audience. Nobody else is on the stage. This is Hamlet telling us his real thoughts, his inner, that which is within which passes show. Okay? Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Hamlet's opening soliloquy tells us Hamlet is at the very least thinking about what? Suicide. Self-slaughter. Literally, the English for Latin sue, self-side. Murder. Oh God. God. How weary, stale, flat, unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. What does that word uses mean there? All the things this world has to offer. All the enjoyments, all the pleasures, all the practical. They're what? Weary. What does it mean to be weary? Worn out, tired. All those things of this world, they're worn out. They're tired. They're stale. They lack flavor. They're flat. They're not varied. They don't have texture, so to speak. They are unprofitable. Does he mean they don't make me money? They don't do me any good. So what's he saying about life? Sucks, man. Oh, that the canon had not fixed his, the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Fie on it. F it. F it. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. That's the world. Why is it unweeded? It's kind of like the gardener is checked out. What's the it? Denmark? Sure. All of the world? Yeah, probably. What happens when weeds go to seed? You know, dandelion, beautiful little flower, right? Make wine, all that kind of stuff. after the flower, it sends up that stalk with the big, like, globe thing, and then poof. So the one dandelion becomes thousands of dandelions. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Possess. What does it mean to possess? Own, control, hold, rule, wield. If I were directing Hamlet, when Hamlet says that line, I would have him look at the door that Claudius left out of. Things rank and gross. Ew, Claudius. That I should come to this. What's the it? But 2 months dead. But doesn't mean 2 months. It means under 2 months. Not even 2 months. Almost 2 months. Nay, not so much. Not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion. Who's Hyperion? The sun god. Way up there on that hierarchy. To a satyr. What's a satyr? Human and goat. Not even centaur. Centaur is at least human and horse. I mean, horse, magnificent, but a freaking goat. That is, think great chain of being, a god up here, high to subhuman. What's he comparing? My dead father, Hyperion, to this. So loving to my mother that he might not teem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Not literally, he means figuratively, but it's like they go outside for a stroll, and my father would say, "Stop, winds. You'll damage Gertrude's face." Heaven and earth. Must I remember? Must I remember what? What his father was like. Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on. That is, she was so always with him like he fed her existence. And yet, within a month, there we go, not even a month, let me not think on it. Okay, let me back up. Within a month, is that referring to Hamlet's father's death? The marriage. He's not even been in the ground 30 days. Let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman. Is Hamlet a misogynist? I'm going to take a bold stance and say, no, he is not. What is he talking about? He's talking about his mother's frailty. And it's not just frailty. He is talking about, let me say something. Shakespeare is betraying an attitude that was common at his day. After all, we can't expect Shakespeare in 1600 to have 2025 values. Okay? One of those ideas is that women can never be sexually satisfied. Not by one man, not by two, not by three, not by five, not by a dozen, not by 100. Kind of put a turnstile on the bedroom door, okay? Which Chaucer has that mentality too. Chaucer, in one of his tales, essentially says, it's not the word turnstile, but it's the Middle English form of putting like take a ticket and get in line. Men, don't trust your wives, in other words, all right? So, frailty, thy name is woman. He's getting at why she's frail, what this frailty is. With which she followed, a little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. She what? A beast that once, that is lacks, discourse of reason would have mourned longer. She what? Married with my uncle. It's not just that she married. That's bad enough. She married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month. Ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Notice, unrighteous tears. She got married. Here's the frailty. Most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. Why is she frail? She couldn't wait. She had to have sex. And she has sex with his uncle. Incest. Incestuous sheets. Why the phrase with such dexterity?
Like, you didn't even have any resistance.
Like, there were obstacles to the bed, and she's a gymnast, man. She just, like a ninja. She was so quick to get into bed, she just, everything. This tells us as much about Hamlet's perception of his mother. Let me rephrase this. This tells us as much about Hamlet as it does about Hamlet's perception of his mother. Now, a lot of people, and I think they're totally off the deep end, but a lot of people read passages like this and tell us, what's Hamlet really talking about? Think Sigmund Freud.
Oedipus complex.
Think the Oedipus complex. What's Hamlet really want? He wants to be the one jumping with such dexterity into incestuous sheets. He wants to replace his father in his bed. And damn it, his uncle beat him to it. Totally ludicrous, in my opinion. And here's why. Nothing in the play suggests that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he wouldn't be condemning incestuous sheets if it was what he desired.
Yeah. Of course, he's got to keep it so that it can get published in the stationer's register. Because this banned things. Okay? John Donne's first edition of poetry published of Donne's was published after his death. And they wouldn't publish it at first. It had to get cleaned up. We're told certain things had to be removed. Because he was a priest, but he also, before he was a priest, he wrote some pretty risque, raunchy poetry. Those of you in 3010, if we have time, we'll get to some of it. Assuming we finish Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by then. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. Why must he hold his tongue?
He's not the king.
He's not the king. Why else? Who can he go tell about this? Come here, I need to talk to you about my mom, because she's a whore. She's sleeping with my brother or my uncle. And who's he going to go tell? This isn't right. Okay, I'll throw out a name. Maybe Horatio. He can probably trust Horatio. Okay?
It's also worth mentioning the fact that it's not just his mom and his uncle that are sleeping together, it's the king and the queen that are doing this. So it's like, if he talks about them in this way, it might result in someone losing their head.
And remember, as we see throughout the play, the name for the country often stands in for the name of the king. So if Claudius is committing incest, what does that say about the whole country? As we will hear, something's rotten in the state of Denmark. Okay? Everything flows down. With that whole great chain of being, if something is wrong at the highest point of one of those levels, it affects everything in that level. So, Horatio comes in. Your lordship, hail to your lordship. I'm glad to see you well. Horatio, or I do forget myself. That is, you are Horatio, right? Hamlet's good friends with Horatio. What does he mean? Why has he forgotten what Horatio looks like? Hamlet's been at Elsinore since the death of his father, which is somewhere around 2 months. Is that really you? Yes, it is. So, they talk a little bit. Hamlet wants to know, why are you here from Wittenberg? Why aren't you still in school? And Marcellus comes in, he greets Marcellus. Hamlet again asks, why are you here from Wittenberg? A truant disposition, that is, I'm playing hooky. I would not hear your enemies say so. I wouldn't hear your enemies ascribe such behavior to you. No. Give me the real reason. What is your affair in Elsinore? Third time. I came to see your father's funeral. Don't mock me. I think it was to see my mother's wedding. Indeed, it followed hard upon. Now, that implies Dad was buried in the morning and Mom got married in the evening. Implies. I'm not saying that literally happened. Okay? What Horatio is saying is, they did happen close in time. Hamlet said earlier, within a month, less than a month. Thrift, Horatio. That is, come on, we have to be thrifty. We have to make our funds and everything, last. So what happened? He gives an example. The baked meats for the funeral dinner that you provide for people who came, what? They became the meal for the wedding feast. Wasn't that long. The meat didn't go bad. Okay? And Hamlet says, my father, 184, my father. Methinks I see my father. Where, my lord? In my mind's eye. Meaning in his imagination. When he says, methinks I see my father. Methinks. Present tense. Hamlet's telling us, like everywhere he goes, he sees his father. He can't get his father out of his mind. Is that healthy? Hamlet's first soliloquy. Is that healthy? What's he thinking about? Suicide. That's not healthy. Suicide is never healthy. As the song, the original words to MASH, the TV show, suicide is dangerous. It brings on many changes. Yeah. Not one that you want to keep. Why? Catholic Church says what about suicide? In Shakespeare's day, it's the, really, mortal sin. It is the sin against the Holy Spirit. As Christ says, it's the one sin that can't be forgiven. Why? Because there is no opportunity for what? You can't repent. You can't say, sorry, God, I repent. Boom. You got to be able to go, oops, after the. This is going to be an important issue. Hugely important issue within the poem, play. So, Horatio, I saw him once. I saw your father once. Oh, so goodly king. Looked every inch the part of a king. He was a man taken for all in all. That is, you seen one man, you seen them all. Shall not look upon his like again, though. I think I saw him last night. Who? Who'd you see? Your father. The king, my father. Season your admiration. That is, whoa, calm down there, boy. Season your admiration. That's probably telling us something about Hamlet's eyes. He's starting to wig out. Calm down, Hamlet. I'll tell you. So, Horatio relates what Marcellus and Bernardo and Francisco have seen and what he saw last night. Where on the platform. Did you speak? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't answer. Strange. Horatio, as I do live, my honored lord, 'tis true. When Hamlet says 'tis strange, Horatio's interpreting that to mean that's incredible, not the way we usually mean the word incredible today. Because today we mean that's fantastic. Like, I got a raise. That would be incredible. Why? It means unbelievable. 'Tis true. And we did think it written down in our duty to let you know. That is, we thought you should know. When are you keeping watch? Tonight? He goes, I'll be there. Don't tell anybody else. 2:48 or so. 2:47 maybe. If it assumed, just before the end of the scene, if it assumed my noble father's person, what does that word assume mean there?
If it looks like him.
If it looks like him, if it takes the form and shape of him, I'll speak to it. Though hell itself should gape and bid me hold my peace. What has Hamlet just told us? Hell's not going to stop me. I'll march into hell to do this. I pray you all, if you have hitherto concealed the sight, let it be tenable in your silence still. Don't tell anybody, and I will requite your loves. They all leave but Hamlet. Second soliloquy. My father's spirit in arms. All is not well. I doubt, meaning I expect, some foul play. Oh, would the night were come. We're not told what time of the day it is, but Hamlet's saying, come on, come on, come on. Midnight, come, quickly. Till then, second time we've heard something like this. Sit still, my soul. Earlier it was, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. My heart's going to break, but I'm not going to say anything. Here, sit still, my soul. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth overwhelm them to men's eyes. That is an old English or British axiom. Chaucer uses it in Nun's Prioress's Tale, I think. Murder will out. Little kid gets murdered by a Jew, and people are brought in, and we hear this, help me, and it's the little murdered kid's voice. People go to where the voice is, and they find the body. Part of the anti-Semitic nature of medieval literature. Okay? 1:3. We see Laertes and his sister Ophelia. We've seen Laertes before, we've heard Laertes before, but we've not heard Ophelia. So, he's all ready, he's got everything packed, and he asked, how are you doing? Let me hear from you. Okay? He says to her, sister, as the winds give benefit and convoys assistant, do not sleep, but let me hear from you. Do you doubt that? We don't know what she's talking about, the do you doubt that. He tells us, he gives us an idea, maybe as they are walking in, they're talking. So they've been talking off stage. We don't hear any of that. They come in, and he says, my necessaries are embarked, and such. And when she says, do you doubt that? That's referring to something that was said off stage. Laertes. For Hamlet and the trifling of his favor hold it a fashion and a toy in blood, a violet in youth of primy nature, forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, to perfume and suppliants of a minute, no more. What's he telling her about Hamlet? First of all, what is that telling us about Hamlet and Ophelia?
That they have some relation.
They have some kind of relationship. Okay? What kind of relationship? Look at the language he uses. It's a romantic relationship. They're not doing the horizontal dance in the sheets, though,
It's like a courting.
like in Kenneth Branagh's film version.
It's like a fling, maybe?
It's like a courtship.
It's the beginning of that. It's like a courtship. Okay? The trifling of his favor. He's saying Hamlet's favor towards you is a trifle. What's a trifle? It's a little thing that is unimportant. He's saying, you are what? You're bling to Hamlet. You're a shiny thing that has attracted his eyes. Hold it a fashion and toy in blood. Hold his favor a fashion, like a fashion. What does that mean? Clothing. It can be put on and taken off. It's like he's going to wear you one day, he's going to put on another piece of clothing another day. A violet in the youth of primy nature. Anybody know anything about violets?
They have lifespans.
They're very short living. Forward, not permanent. That is, they and then die. No more, but so. Really? That's all I can think of what is starting between she and Hamlet? Think it no more. Why? Big long speech. For nature crescent, that is, at the beginning and growing, does not grow alone in thews and bulk, but as this temple waxes, the inward service, that as this temple, the body, why does he call it a temple? Christianity, temple of the Holy Spirit. What else? It's the temple of the mind. The inward service of the mind and soul grows wide with all. That is, as a person ages and grows and develops, goes from an infant to a child, to preteen, to teen, to young adult, to adult, what happens? The mind is growing too, and the mind starts doing what? It starts moving outward from the body. A 25-year-old does not think about the things a 15-year-old or a 5-year-old think of. That's his point. But that's the beginning of his point. So, perhaps he loves you now. Maybe he really does. And now no soil nor coddle doth besmirch the virtue of his will. His will, his intentions, and his desires. And even possibly, because the word will in Shakespeare had 4 different meanings. Volition was 1. Intentions, desires, purposes, thoughts, that's 2. Third one, I'm doing these in the order I usually speak in. I'm drawing a blank. And the fourth one, third one is sexual desires. Fourth one, genitalia. Shakespeare's sonnet 135. Puns all throughout. There's like 17, something like that, uses of the word will. Also means his name. When thou hast thy will, thou hast not thy will. When you have your will, all those, your volition, your desire, your sexual desire, and your genitalia, you don't have your will, nor do you have me, my will. He just thoroughly takes apart all the different meanings of that word, okay? So it could include that too. But what he's getting at is, maybe right now he really, truly, honestly loves you. Maybe there's no dirty thoughts involved. But you must fear his greatness weighed. What is his greatness?
He's part of the royal family.
Yeah.
What part?
Like
He's the prince and future king. His greatness weighed means when he starts to think about, the person I choose to be with will be the queen and mother of the next king. His greatness weighed, his will. I literally never thought about all those meanings in this context of this play, too. It's not his own. His sexual desires, they don't belong to him himself. Why? They belong to the future queen and what they will produce together, as well as just his volition. what he wants to do. Princes today still have to think about that. I would almost bet you anything. If Prince William, before he got married, and before Harry got married, if Prince William had died during one of his helicopter flights when he was performing rescue missions up off of Wales in the Irish Sea, and Harry had not been married yet, I would bet you the $45 I have in my wallet, there is no way in hell Queen Elizabeth would have allowed Harry to marry Meghan Markle.
Oh no. I mean, she barely did anyway.
Well, yeah, she barely did anyways. And that wasn't because of Meghan's racial background. It's because she's not what?
Royalty.
She's not English. And she's not royalty.
Yeah.
Okay? William was allowed to marry Kate. She wasn't royalty. No royalty. Middleton's rich, middle-class family. I mean, really rich, middle-class family. Charles could only marry Diana Spencer. Why? Because the Spencer line can be traced back to royalty. Who was his real love? Even then, his current wife, Queen Camilla. Okay? So, his will is not his own. For he himself is subject to his birth. It's like, who in the world would want to be royal? He may not, as unvalued, that is, poor slobs like us. Sorry. Poor slobs like me. None of you are slobs. As unvalued persons do, carve for himself. What does he mean by carve there? Is this some weird carving up women? No, he's not Ted Bundy. He means choose. Carve out his life for himself. For on his choice depends what? The safety and health of his whole state. If he doesn't produce an heir, what's going to happen to Denmark? And therefore must his choice be circumscribed. What does it mean to circumscribe something? To draw a boundary around it. Laertes is telling Ophelia, Ophelia, you're not within the circle of appropriate choices. You're just the daughter of a royal advisor. Who would be? Well, maybe old Norway had a daughter, princess of a neighboring kingdom. Unto the voice and yielding of that body whereof he is the head. That is, his choice must be circumscribed by that body. So, if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it as he in his particular act and place may give his saying deed. That is, he can prove it, which is no further than the main vow of Denmark goes withal. So, weigh what loss your honor may sustain if with too credent, what's credent? Believable, believing, we have a word for that today, it's not credent, gullible. If with too gullible ear you listen to, doesn't just mean hear. It means you pay attention to what he says and you believe it. Or lose your heart or your chaste treasure open, her virginity, to his unmastered importunity. Unmastered. His ungoverned. Because what's he saying about Hamlet?
He's just a boy, so you're right.
More than yes, he's just a boy, but what else? He's not in control of his passions. What's he telling Ophelia really? Don't be alone with him. Don't, use modern example. Don't sit in the back row of a dark movie theater that nobody's watching the movie alone, Fear it, Ophelia. He doesn't want her to lose what? The thing that makes her valuable. Hate to say it, Shakespeare's day and earlier, her virginity. You know, the bans that I talked about, one of the cause for someone to say, yeah, I know she shouldn't get married because I slept with her last week. That would be cause for that marriage to be called off. So, keep you in the rear of your affection. I love that phrase, because what does it mean? Affection has like a spectrum. Okay? He's saying, stay in the back of your affection. That is, don't let your affection run wild out in front. Ophelia. I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart. It's going to stand sentinel, sitting there with a double-barrel shotgun, you know, keeping Hamlet away. But, good my brother, do not, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, whilst like a puffed and reckless libertine, himself the primrose path of dalliance treads, and recks not his own reed. What has she just turned? What has she just said to her brother?
She's like, I'll take your advice, but take your own advice too.
Yeah. What phrase is she saying can't be applied? Don't be doing no double standard here. Don't tell me I got to be chaste and blah, 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 blah. While you're going off to where? Where's he a student at?
Oh.
City of Paris. What's Paris also called? City of Love. I mean, most women I've talked to, if we start talking about languages, they're like, 2 languages. I'll be naked in your bed in 5 minutes. French and Italian. Not German. Make you want to vomit, okay? Or at least my sisters have said that, my wife has said that, one of my daughters has said that. It's like just even if it's not real French and not real Italian, if it just sounds French or Italian. So, you take your own advice. Polonius comes in. Still here, Laertes? You should be on your way. But he says, but before you go, here's my blessing, and I'm going to give you some advice. These few precepts in thy memory, look thou character. These few precepts, these proverbs, he's going to say. What does he mean when he says, look thou character? Is he saying, pay attention to your character? No. Character here means to write or to inscribe. Inscribe these proverbs in your mind. Interestingly, Hamlet, probably not today, unfortunately, is going to say all things he has inscribed in his mind, he's going to wipe away and he's going to write something else after he speaks to the ghost. So, look at Polonius' advice. I'm going to ask you a question. You've read this. Is this good advice? He gives Laertes several pieces of do's and don'ts. Is this good, practical, dealing with the real world advice? And the reason I'm asking that, most critics suggest no.
On the surface, it seems like it is.
I think they're completely wrong. This is very good. All of this is extremely wise advice. What's the problem? What did Ophelia just tell Laertes? Follow your own advice. Polonius comes in. He gives a bunch of advice. He doesn't follow any of it. He is one of those ungracious pastors that Ophelia referred to. So, give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. What is Polonius' job? To give his thoughts tongue. he is a counselor to the king. What do you think, Polonius? And so he speaks. And we're going to see Polonius speaks a lot. The problem is Polonius doesn't know when to shut the hell up. What does that mean? Any unproportioned thought his act. What should you do before you act? And, I mean, that's 100% it. Give me 10% more.
Like
Weigh the consequences. Take the thought to its logical conclusion. See what ramifications are, what the consequences are. Okay? Don't give any unproportioned, unthought out thought its act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. What does that mean? Be thou familiar, but not vulgar. How many of you, well, I'll give an example. We've thrown a few parties over the years. We are not party people. I'm not a people person. Just at all. I'm antisocial. People have said sociopathic, antisocial. Anyways, but we've had parties like my 50th birthday. Another guy at church, his birthday's a few days before mine. We threw a big bash at our house. Lots of liquor and a lot of fun. There were people who wouldn't leave. Like we said, okay, this is going to be from like 6 to 10. I'm not kidding. There were still people there at 1 and 2 o'clock. I got pajamas on. It's like, hello. That's vulgar. That's being too familiar. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, we were all familiar. Why? Because we were all not entirely drunk, but good time. But that's what he means. Be known, but don't be that one guy who never leaves. Those friends thou hast, that is, if you have friends, good. And their adoption tried, you've proven their friendship. What? Grapple them to thy soul. Make them soul mates. Not romantic, erotic, that kind of thing. With hoops of steel. That is, make it so that you are friends how? Forever. BFF. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged courage. That is, people think because of, I use this because it's usually used on something like this, social media, and your quote unquote friends on social media are friends.
That's parasocial.
They're not. Who are your friends? His point. They're the ones you see regularly, frequently, the ones you do things with. These friends are fair weather friends. Things get hard, things get tough. You need to borrow money, you need to borrow a car, you need someone to give you a lift 400 miles to buy another car, take you to the airport. Most of these friends aren't going to be there. Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Don't get into fights. But being in, that is, if you get in a fight, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Beat the living daylights out of them if it's a physical fight. If it's a verbal fight, so destroy their argument, they know, back off. C.S. Lewis, because of his training, because of the education he received when he left the first college he went to, the first boarding school, because all kind of homosexual sex and stuff was going on, and he wasn't interested, he went to a tutor in England, a guy called the Old Knock is what he called him. This guy taught him to question every comment someone made. And this is probably the purpose behind, in Tolkien's The Hobbit, when Gandalf arrives at Bilbo's house, and Bilbo says, good day, and then Gandalf stays a little too long, and Bilbo starts saying, good day again. Gandalf rips him apart. He shreds. Well, now you don't mean good day as in welcome. Now you mean good day, you want me to leave. How can the same two words mean totally different things? That was Lewis, apparently. It got to the point where people did not want to have conversations with him until he mellowed out a little bit. All right? Give every man thy ear. You can imagine Monty Python. What's that mean? Listen. Someone wants to talk to you? Listen to them. But few thy voice. Keep your opinions to yourself. I should have followed this advice when I started here. Take each man's censure. Listen to criticism, but reserve thy judgment. That means two things. You shouldn't have done. Oh, yeah, well, listen to it and don't respond. And what else does it mean? Don't criticize others. Good advice? Here, based on my 63 years, yeah, this is pretty good advice. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, that is, wear clothes you can afford. Wear as nice of clothes as you can afford. Rich, made well, but not gaudy. Don't be Elton John. Literally had a student once, had two students do this. Had one student, totally different class, different year, a guy came into class wearing a tux. It's kind of like a little overdressed. Had a young lady, another time, I'm not kidding, it was a wedding dress. And it was because her very next class was a fashion class, designing, and she didn't have time to change. Looked great, but it was like a little bit, thank you for making everybody else look kind of better in this class, but why? For the apparel oft proclaims the man. A lot of people, I read stuff about businesses and such. And a lot of employers today are talking about people your age, I'm not claiming this apply to anybody in here, showing up for interviews like this for a managerial job. Nope. You wear a suit, tie, whole 9 yards. Why? Apparel oft proclaims. It is like a beacon way ahead of time. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. For loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulleth edge of husbandry. Don't borrow money from a friend, because if you forget to pay it back, your friend has lost the money and the friend. And flip that around. And notice, borrowing dulleth edge of husbandry. What's husbandry? It's hard work. Our society, our government, makes it way too easy. To what? Just take out a loan. You gotta pay him back. Joe Biden's not around anymore, folks. All those deferrals during Biden's, let me rephrase that. Deferrals that the Supreme Court said he couldn't do and did it anyways. They all now have to be paid. You take out that loan, you sign a promissory note. It means I will begin repaying this on when you graduate, kind of thing. And this above all, that is above all of these other things, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. What does it mean to your own self be true? If you're lying, you know you're lying, right? Can you lie to yourself? I mean, you can try. Some people have made themselves believe things that aren't true.
Yeah.
Taylor's back from hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm going to take a wild guess. Might have something to do with Taylor going in and out quite a bit.
Yes.
Has to do with a lawyer. Okay? To thine own self be true. That means follow yourself. Follow what's in here. What is being implied?
Like listen to your gut, trust your gut.
What's the gut? Conscience. Everyone has, with very few exceptions. There are people who are born literally without the facility to say right and wrong. Almost always they become sociopaths and serial killers. They cannot empathize. Whatever it is that creates the conscience, they're born without. Okay? He's saying, follow what? Use another phrase. Your compass. Because we all have a compass. And the compass works a variety of ways. Here, I'm going to give you an example. Okay? I'm going to give you a physical example. You know, I mentioned in that email something about this dizziness that I've been having. Found out from ear, nose, and throat guy. You know, within our ears, we've got all these tubes and, you know, not crustacean tubes, eustachian tubes and such. Well, there's 3 loops. In those 3 loops, there are literal crystals in your ears. One of those loops, it's real easy to get those crystals realigned. Okay? Those crystals are what enable us to know forward, backward, left, right, up, down with our bodies. That is, we know when we're moving forward, we know when we're moving backward, when we know when we're moving left or right, even if we're blindfolded. Why? Because it's like there's something floating on fluid. These crystals are like floating on fluid, and they determine that. Last couple of days, I felt like I'm walking on a slant. So I'm kind of consciously making myself, because there's something wrong in those compasses, let's say. He's saying, follow the compass you have inside, and what? You can never be untrue to anyone, because you'll be being true to yourself. Okay? So, you have my blessing. Laertes leaves. Okay? He reminds Ophelia, remember what I said? What were you guys talking about? Polonius wants to know. What is that an element of? I had it written down the other day over here. The first question of the play. Observing, watching. The next thing, spying. Whose business it is to know what his son and daughter were talking about? Just because he's his father doesn't mean he has a right to know that. Not even in Shakespeare's day. Oh, something touching the Lord Hamlet. Alarm bells start going off. Tell me. 'Tis told me he hath very oft of late given private time to you, Polonius says, and you have of your audience been most free and bounteous. That is, whenever Hamlet wants to see you, you're available. Is that true? I must tell you, you do not understand yourself so clearly as it behooves my daughter and her honor. Ophelia, how dare you? She's like, well, line 100. He hath, my lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me. What does she mean by tenders?
Like little gestures.
Little gestures. I'll give you an example. When I was courting my wife, before she obviously became my wife, but before that became serious, the first time, because she dumped me, and then I ignored her for almost a year, and then she was like putty in my hands. Anyways, I would send her cards, send her flowers, and I was a poor college student. Good thing I had my dad's visa. Send her cards, send her flowers, we'd go out for dinner. I've always been that way, okay? That's what he's talking about. Why? Cards, flowers, dinner. What are they all meant to convey? Golly gee, I really like you. Look at Polonius' response. I know it's 11:45. Affection? Puh. You speak like a green girl. What's that mean? Young. Do we know how old Ophelia is? We're never told how old Ophelia is. Green, young, naive, unsifted in such perilous circumstance. You don't know what boys are like. Do you believe his tenders? I do not know what to believe. You tell me, my Lord, what I should think. Ophelia is often portrayed, let me rephrase that, characterized in criticism and such as an airhead. I think she's about the farthest thing from an airhead. And we're going to find out why on Monday. And hopefully we'll finish Act 1. We will finish Act